Introducing G-Core Managed Kubernetes, the ultimate solution for streamlined Kubernetes management. Experience support for bare metal nodes and a robust 99.9 uptime SLA at no extra cost. Provision Kubernetes clusters effortlessly with a single click using their intuitive dashboard, API, or Terraform. Seamlessly integrate with G-Core external DNS and easily provision block volume storage for your requirements. And of course, stay up to date with the latest Kubernetes versions. Plus, they have an exclusive offer just for you. Click the G-Core link in the show notes and use promo code CLOUDCAST and receive €100 credit to try G-Core services today. That's promo code CLOUDCAST to receive €100 credit on your G-Core services today.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. We are on to July of 2023, the second half of the year. First half of the year, gonzo, behind us. We are on to the second half of the year, second half of 2023, and you can start planning out your Q3 planning. Maybe you're going to start doing Q4 planning or even 2024 planning. All sorts of stuff's going to happen in the second half of the year. Companies are going to reset and maybe where they thought they were, where they're going to be. So always a milestone. And for those of you listening, you're probably listening to this around the 4th of July holiday in the United States. We will be getting this show out on the Sunday. So Sunday Perspective show. We'll have another show actually on, I think, July 5th. For those of you that are, traveling with kids or traveling with family, Brandon Witchard from Software Defined Talk is going to join us for a mid-year, what's been going on in 23, what do we expect to see the rest of the year show. So a couple of interesting things coming up to start the month of July. I hope everybody's doing well. What I want to talk about in this one is going to be a little bit of a retrospective and a little bit of a congratulations and a little bit of a, kind of perspective on a gentleman named Kelsey Hightower. So for those of you that are around the cloud native community, you're very familiar with Kelsey. If you've been around the CNCF, if you've been around Kubernetes, you're familiar with Kelsey. Kelsey, we've been very fortunate, has been a guest on the show a couple of times. Most people know him from the work that he did at Google. Prior to that, a lot of us originally got to know him when he was at CoreOS. He was doing a bunch of work before that, but that was really kind of the first time I feel like he popped up in a very public way. And the reason we're going to talk about Kelsey this week is he announced via Twitter, via short tweet, that he is retiring from Google as of this last week. So not exactly sure what he's planning to do next. Have not had any communication with him. Not sure if he is planning to just take a bunch of time off and go live on a tropical island. Not sure if he's planning to do consulting. Not sure if he's planning to be like his kids, sports coach, or what he's planning to do. He just simply said, I spent a lot of time teaching other people about computers and things, and it's now time for me to teach myself how to live life. And so I want to spend a little bit of time both, acknowledging the work that he did, which was really important for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, but more importantly, kind of highlight some things that he did extremely well that I think other people could use as guidance, especially those of you that are in the developer relations space, but more importantly, just anybody who is in the technology space that has to communicate complicated things to a wide variety of people. I think, of all the people in our industry, Kelsey was near the very top of people that were just really, really excellent at communicating complex technologies, why they were important, why people should care about them, how they worked without having to go into ridiculous level of detail. He made it fun, and we'll kind of dive into that after the break. But I know a lot of people I've heard over the years who have been in roles that are facing customers, facing clients, interacting with, different people out in the marketplace. I've said, boy, I wish I was like Kelsey Hightower. I wish I had his skills. I aspire to be like Kelsey. And, I think those of us that have been around the community have learned a lot from what he has put out there. I think a number of us have kind of looked at what he does to be successful, and are there ways you can emulate that? So we're going to talk about that after the break. Is your cloud bill out of control? CloudZero is building a platform that will let you analyze your cloud investment faster than ever before. You'll get accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Cloud Zero is how cloud-driven companies gain more financial control and predictability by driving immediate and ongoing savings. You can answer questions like, how can I save 20% of my cloud bill right now? Who are my most expensive customers? How much does this specific feature cost our business? Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. Again, please visit cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the latest trends in enterprise tech? Look no further than the Breaking Analysis podcast with Dave Vellante. This data-driven program dives into the most important topics facing the enterprise tech industry today. With a data-first approach that leverages ETR's renowned surveys of IT decision-makers and insight from the CUBE community, Breaking Analysis delivers in-depth research on the most important topics facing technologists and IT buyers. Whether you're a business leader, an IT professional, investor, or just an avid follower of the industry, this podcast is a must-listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast wherever you get your podcast and tune in today to stay ahead of the game in enterprise tech. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to talk about kind of the legacy, the footprint, the lessons learned from a gentleman named Kelsey Hightower, who, for those of you who don't know, if you're out Googling him on the internets and on the YouTubes and on the Googles and other things, he was, I'm going to say he was part of developer relations for Google Cloud. That was probably not his official title. I would go look up his official title, but he doesn't have a LinkedIn. He's a little bit like Keiser Sozer. He left a very small footprint, was very visible to those who interacted with him. But I would say he was, as much as anybody at Google, he was sort of the face of Google Cloud in a sort of unique way in that he wasn't a product manager necessarily. I know he was very involved with the product teams. He was very involved with customers and communities at large, talking about not only what Google provided, but also just technology evolutions, how to use that, how to organize teams to be successful, how to be empathetic to your users and listen to what they're trying to do. So I don't exactly know what to call his title, but in essence, what I think the marketplace saw from him was one of, if not the best, one of the best people at being able to take new complex technologies and be able to explain them in ways that not only were understandable, but also entertaining, compelling, drew people in to want to be interested in these technologies. And so he was first and foremost a fantastic communicator. Secondly, he was a fantastic technologist, in terms of being able to understand how to use technology, how to apply technology, and so forth. With him retiring, and again, I don't know what he's going to do next. The technology world is a strange place. You see people who retire or leave and never come back. You don't ever hear about them again. Maybe once in a while you'll see a picture of them from Hawaii or Fiji or something, and maybe that's what he's planning to do. And if he does, more power in the world to him. I think all of us would love to, at some point, have the ability to say, hey, I'm retiring, getting out of technology, because it's a grind. He may show up in a year from now because, as he would say, something dope came along, something really cool came along, and he just had to be part of it. Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe he's going to pop up at various places doing consulting work just because he enjoys being around. I have no idea what he's going to do. But anyways, what I thought I would do as sort of what I'm calling sort of a kudos to Kelsey Hightower is kind of highlight the things that he did, which for anybody who is responsible for being part of communicating technology to people. And again, these could be brand new people to a community, like fifth graders, if you will, or just people that are brand new to a community, all the way up to, talking to executives about, why should you care about this? Because you're thinking, well, I build automobiles, or we create pharmaceuticals, or we fly airplanes, or, we run the government or whatever. Why should I care about technology? That's a low level problem. He was extremely, extremely good at not only explaining this to people, but being so passionate about it that you were always compelled to be like, what is it that gets this guy so excited? What is it that makes him, want to, just be enthusiastic and excited about telling you that? So more than anything, he was extremely good at that. And the reason I want to highlight that is because, as I go through my notes, the world is full of very, very smart people. And if you've worked in the technology world long enough, you know that. There are plenty of people with all sorts of backgrounds who are incredibly smart. They could be academically smart. They could be hands-on smart. They could be architecturally very smart. They could just be the smartest person you've ever met. And while our industry has tons and tons of those, we don't necessarily always get the best ideas. Don't always come out. They don't always win, right? There's plenty of times when you'll be sitting at a bar or you'll meet somebody at an event or just you're online or something and you hear somebody talk about, gosh, this would have been better. If only we could have gotten that done. And the reason I highlight that is so much of what we do in technology is not that we create the coolest thing in the world, because we have a tendency to, we're incrementally create new things. We incrementally build on what came before us. But in order to really get something to take off, to be well known, to be extraordinary, you also have to be able to communicate about it in ways that not just the smartest people in the room understand, but also, the people that are brand new, the people that are somewhere in between, right? Kelsey was really outstanding at that. Now, I'm going to talk kind of in timeline of what I know of Kelsey. And I'm not going to speak to all of it because, again, I don't want to misspeak about what he did prior to being visible with Kubernetes. And I only say that because that was the very first time, and I've been around the industry for a long time, but there are lots of different niches and pockets of the industry. So you can say you've been around for a long time and you don't know about everybody or a lot of people. Kelsey first came into our lives in terms of the Cloudcast, but also I think for a lot of people's lives in terms of anybody who's around the Kubernetes industry or sort of the cloud native part of this industry. He was a product manager at CoreOS. So CoreOS was one of the very first container companies. We're one of the very first Kubernetes companies. He was an early product manager over there. And just kind of out of the blue, he just became this guy that just started speaking up. And he was educating the market. He was trying to explain Kubernetes to people. He was trying to explain why containers were interesting. And then after some period of time, maybe 6 months, 9 months of being kind of visible, he went over to Google. And again, I don't know why he left CoreOS, went to Google. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. And once he went to Google was really around the same time that Kubernetes was beginning to take off. So, he was there at the very first KubeCon. He was speaking. I believe he was still at CoreOS that time. He may have just been at Google. But after that, he became kind of the most visible face that wasn't sort of the founders of Kubernetes, right? So he wasn't Joe Beda. He wasn't Craig McLuckie. He wasn't Clayton Coleman or Derek Carr. He wasn't, Hen Goldberg or, Brian Grant or Tim Hawken, the people who literally wrote the code. But he, in essence, was the person who said, I'm going to be the megaphone for Kubernetes. And I'm going to be the megaphone for this new way of building applications, which for a lot of people kind of blew their mind. It was a very different way of thinking about technology. It was a very different way of saying, well, I thought the things we were doing before were fine. And he was out there sort of going, yeah, they were fine for a set of applications, for a set of business problems, but here's a whole new set of problems. Here's a whole new set of challenges that Kubernetes better aligns to. And so he sort of picked up the flag and became the flag bearer for that. And not just for Google, but for the entire community, right? And I think if we think back about, the people that really made Kubernetes successful, his ability to explain this super complicated technology, because Kubernetes, is complicated, still is, 6, 7, 8 years into it. And one of the very first things he did, and this is something that I think everybody could benefit from, or if you're thinking about I would like to be well known within the industry of whatever you work on, Kelsey did this thing that I don't even know if people still reference it or talk about it anymore. He created something called Kubernetes the hard way. And in essence, the reason he did this, the context of it, was we were beginning to see, not only commercial distributions of Kubernetes pop up, so stuff like CoreOS, or I think it was called CoreOS Tectonic, and Red Hat OpenShift, and there were several others that were out there from a software perspective. But then there was also things like Google GKE, right? And these things were intended to say, hey, instead of figuring out all the nuances and complexities of Kubernetes, just here's software or here's a cloud service. You just kind of turn it on and it's going to work. And what Kelsey did was he said, hey, that very well might be the best way to consume Kubernetes, whether it's for software as a cloud service. He said, but if you believe that this technology is going to be important to you for the long run, you really kind of need to look up under the hood, using that analogy, peel back the onion, if you will, and really understand how it works. And so he created this thing. It's out on GitHub. I put a link to it in the show notes, called Kubernetes the Hard Way. And the whole idea behind it was, if you really want to learn this stuff, you should go through, every aspect of it. And he really built out this thing that became kind of the coda of, here's how you learn about Kubernetes. And here's how you learn not just the easy way, but with the sharp edges exposed, with you probably failing at certain things, with you going, how does that work? I have 5 more questions. How do I go deeper? And what he did, in essence, by doing that was he created for himself a position of authority. And it wasn't a position of authority because he worked at Google. It was a position of authority because he said, I'm going to show you the path forward, right? I'm going to be the person that's knocking down the barriers for you figuring this stuff out. And in doing that, and everybody referencing and everybody talking about it, he created this level of authority for himself. And the lesson in that is, if you want to be an expert in something, or if you want to speak as if you are an expert on something, it's important to not just say, well, I'm a DevRel or whatever the job title is at that thing. My company said I'm that person. You really have to put in the effort to show who you're trying to speak to, your audience, that you are an authority on this stuff. Not just you got a session accepted at somewhere, or you have a blog, or you have a cool Twitter following or whatever. Like, have you done the work to showcase to people that you truly are an authority at stuff and you can prove it? Because what you're doing there is you're trying to bring forth the idea that you're going to teach people, you're going to take on that burden of teaching people, but you're also going to be somebody that people are going to look up to and say, okay, new stuff has come out. Does it matter? Is this the right direction for things to go? What were the trade-offs that were made to get to this point? Right? People are going to look to you for much more than just, hey, you did a demo. Hey, you have a bunch of followers, right? So that was the very first thing he established. The second thing I think he established was, as much as he was at Google, and he would do a number of keynotes in which he would showcase some things that Google did. Obviously, he would speak at Google events. But as much as that, he made it very clear that community was bigger and, to him, more important than representing one company. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily get, is a lot of times people will take one path where they'll go, I'm going to be the best spokesperson for my company, for my technology. And that's perfectly fine, right? That's actually very well respected, because it's very easy to look at your work and people go, oh, yes, they're helping us educate, sell, position, our company, our technology. And if you're really good at it, there's a lot of value in that. There are other people who are like, well, I don't want to be branded as just, working for that company, but also I'm kind of on the fence of like, am I an expert on something? And, so you sort of get stuck in the middle, right? And I think what Kelsey always did was he always said, number one, I want to make the community as big as possible. I want to bring in as many people as possible. I want to build a big tent that anybody can come into. And I think he always, believed the idea that if the pie got bigger for everybody, right? If the tide rose for all boats, that if he was, again, going to be sort of the torchbearer for a technology like Kubernetes or the way to build applications as cloud native, yes, it would benefit Google, but it would also continue to make the market bigger. And that ultimately would help not only his company, but anybody's company. And again, then the burden falls on your company to be like the best you can be, the best, most competitive you can be, build the best products, that sort of stuff. So I think he very much believed that the community was bigger than any one company. The third thing I wrote down is, I think whether he knew it or not, I don't know what his background was. He seemed to believe very much in the rule of 2 versus 1. I call 2 versus 1, the rule of 2 versus 1, which is you're born with 2 ears and you're born with 1 mouth. And so if you take advantage of the fact that you have twice as much capacity to listen as you do to talk, your ability to absorb, to consume, to hear things that are important is really valuable. And I think he was always very open and available with his time to listen to people. And while people always wanted him to come on their podcast and talk and do a keynote and do a webinar, and he did plenty of those, he was very free and open with his time. I think as much as that, he was very adamant that, he wanted to do listening sessions with customers. And he would do, the last time I saw him was in Amsterdam. He did an hour and a half, just ask me anything at KubeCon. No script, no pre-questions, just him on a stage in front of 1,000 or so people, just answering any question you had, right? Listening to what you had. And again, some of the questions were, hey, how does this work? Or, hey, what'd you do with your, how did you get to your point? But some were criticisms. And it was him listening, internalizing it, and then giving feedback. So I think he was very, very good at that belief of sort of the rule of 2 versus 1. The next thing on my list is he didn't take himself too seriously. If you ever saw him present, he was always happy. He was always laughing. There was always a part of what he was doing that would highlight the absurdity of some of the things that we do in our industry and sort of laugh at them and realize that, hey, yeah, that's what we do. And boy, some of it's absurd. So his laugh was infectious, and it was important. It was an important part of how he communicated. He spoke with authority, but he also spoke jovially, and he spoke with a humility that was very, very infectious. So I put a link in the show notes. He wrote an interesting GitHub press pull request about no code. They're worth taking a look at if you've never seen it. I think he did an incredible job, and this is a very difficult skill to find. The only other person I think I've ever really seen that can do this is a gentleman named John Chambers, who was CEO of Cisco for a long time. Kelsey was incredibly good in front of a crowd at not only connecting with the crowd, right, the broader crowd, speaking, essentially to the back of the room, but he could also grab the attention of one individual, one person in the room. Like, he would focus in on one person, and you would see all eyes pointing to him. And I think that ability to recognize that there are times when you have to command the entire room, and there are times when you need to focus your message to one person. And it doesn't have to be an actual individual, but the ability to bring it down to a very human level, to a specific problem level, and get the person to look you in the eye and acknowledge that you're trying to communicate a very specific point. He was very, very good at that as well. And so that's, if you ever go back and look at his talks, or if you ever go and look at John Chambers' talks from Cisco from years and years ago, that's a skill set that is incredibly powerful, because it can consume an entire room, but it makes everybody in the room walk out of there and go, yeah, I think he was really talking to me at that one point. I wasn't right in front of him, but I think he was talking to me. And that makes people want to run through a wall for whatever that message is you're talking about. Last couple of things. We live in a world, especially these days with social media, where it's easy to troll. It's easy to argue, to fight, to debate. He always seemed to highlight the good more than the bad, with the realization that, this stuff is very difficult. And if you're always highlighting the bad, not only do you knock people down, do you bring people down, but you run the risk that people, in a broader sense go, oh, well, if they're always talking about what's bad, maybe it's not that good, right? And, you could argue, well, there were a lot of flaws and a lot of sharp edges with Kubernetes, but there was also a lot of good stuff there. There was a lot of good stuff in the CNCF. There was a lot of good stuff around what people were doing. And you didn't always have to highlight the bad. People kind of knew what they were. He was always focused on highlighting the good. And that could be in the technology, that could be in people, that could be in some cool project. He talked about what was dope, what was cool, what was awesome. And again, some of them were just small things. They were a shell script that somebody built. They were, some cool project that somebody spent a weekend doing that he would find out about and he would highlight. And I think, as you're thinking about, how much positivity are you bringing to any given talk or any given interaction versus how much negativity you're putting out there, or kind of argumentative that you're putting out there, error on the side, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 positivity versus sort of negativity. And two last things. Second to last one, I feel like he always demonstrated the art of the possible. And what I mean by that is, he never was somebody who, at least that I ever saw, that put something out there that was like, in the future when cars are flying and, when AI takes over everything. But it was always like, we've reached a point where at mile marker 4, what does mile marker 5 look like? Or mile marker 6, right? He was kind of trying to show, how do we get the next couple of steps? And I'm going to spend some time building a demo to show you what's possible. And I'm going to show you that, one person could do this. Now, granted, he was very smart, he was very capable, but he always showed you that whatever was being talked about wasn't just talk; it was possible, and he showed it in a demonstration. And I think that was incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of people could benefit from having that skill and that determination. And the last thing I'll talk about that I'm coming to appreciate more and more and more, both the older I get in life and the more different types of people that I interact with life. I think Kelsey did an incredible job, and some of the times he did it on purpose, and some of the times he just did it because it was the right thing to do. Kelsey did an incredible job of making people in the community who maybe were less visible, whether you were a different ethnicity, if you were a minority, if you were a different skin color, if you spoke a different way, if you were from a different background, from, sort of the mainstream Silicon Valley tech bros. And he not only made people aspire to see, okay, this is what this guy's accomplished, and he's not afraid to talk about it, and he's not afraid to talk about his struggles, but he also actively sought out other people, whether it was, other co-hosts for events he was doing, co-chair people for running one of the CNCF events. He was always very good at bringing diversity and people that might not be as visible to the forefront. And I think in doing that, and I don't know for sure, but I think in doing that, he was very deliberately trying to make sure that more and more people in the audience looked up at the stage, looked up at the spotlights and said, that person looks like me. That person sounds like me. That person doesn't look like the other 5 or 7 people that I already saw, but they look like me. And I think that inspired a lot of people. I think, during the last 5 to 7 years, I saw more and more people who, were proud of, not being exactly the same. And I think a lot of that came from, seeing the confidence that Kelsey had, what he was able to demonstrate, and just the basic fact that he put people that looked different in front of other people. And people that looked like them went, this is possible. And I think that's incredibly important. Maybe if he has no other legacy, if we, forget about everything he did, that legacy is incredibly important, right? It goes back to his belief, I think, that community is bigger than any individual. It's bigger than any company. And the bigger you can make a community, the more inclusive you can make a community, the better off the community ends up becoming. And so, I think looking back on the CNCF, Dan Kahn, the original, not founder, but really kind of executive, head executive, was an incredibly important person in the CFCF's timeline, life cycle. I think we'll look back at Kelsey and go, yeah, he was equally important, if not more important. And again, I'm not trying to rank people. That doesn't make any sense. But, he's up there in the pantheon, in the Mount Rushmore of people that did good things for the CNCF. And, so for that, on behalf of the Cloudcast and for Aaron and I and everybody, we say thank you, Kelsey. Kudos to you. Hope you enjoy retirement. I hope it is long. I hope it is enjoyable, low stress. Get out of it what you want. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I've been talking for a long time. Glad we got a chance to hopefully highlight some things that I think he did incredibly well, that I think other people with the right personality, the right determination, the right skills, the right attitude could easily emulate. But you have to be willing to do it. And some of those things, aren't the easiest things in the world to do. So hopefully there will be more and more people like Kelsey Hightower that were inspired by Kelsey. But again, congratulations on your announcement. Congratulations on whatever's next. And the CNCF and the cloud native community and a lot of the tech community has been better off for having you in it and for knowing you. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope everybody's having a good long holiday weekend. If you're here in the States, if you're elsewhere in the world, a long weekend from Americans giving you a hard time about stuff because they're, off shooting off fireworks and eating hot dogs and stuff like that. So with that, I'll wrap it up. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for telling a friend. Thanks for helping us grow the Cloudcast community, hopefully emulating some of the things we learned from Kelsey. So with that, I'll wrap it up. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.